Hey, welcome. I am so happy that you made the choice to be here today. I'm Susie, and I have a really special guest today, and we're excited to jump in and just see where this conversation goes. Ursula Taylor is with me. Will you tell us a little bit about us to kind of give us some color for our conversation?
Sure, Susie, and thanks for having me.
Yeah.
No, I work as a consultant, helping clients avoid and navigate conflict and also assisting and supporting leaders in becoming stronger leaders and developing teams. I view conflict as opportunity when we understand what it is and from where it derives. My background prior to this chapter of my life was a litigation attorney. I built a nationally recognized litigation practice doing healthcare and managed care litigation and arbitration. And what I found is that, as humans, we often misunderstand what conflict is, where it comes from, and how to most efficiently and effectively resolve it. So, my current consultancy is really a little bit of a disruption to the status quo, but it's based more on what we know as humans, what we know from mental health, what we know from mindfulness strategies, and what we know from leadership development and training.
Oh, I love this so much. I'm so excited because I feel like you're saying let's embrace the idea that conflict is going to happen. Especially as leaders, how do we not shy away from it? Because I work with so many people that are really are perplexed when they haven't had the conversation, they have and people aren't setting, meeting expectations, and then there's conflict around that. And it's almost like you're shifting the view of it and going, let's look for that because it's a part of our social engagement, if you will.
Right, it is. And so there's really two parts: conflict or friction or tension or discomfort or uncomfortability is part of the human experience. It's not something we seek, right? We're not seeking friction for the sake of friction. We're not like, oh, it'll really help me if I, just have a round and a spar with my coworker over here. That in and of itself isn't what helps or what creates a path towards our own personal evolution, but we don't want to be afraid of it because there's a signal or there's a pathway or there's a flag or there's a, hey, look at me, think about this. And it's less about the other person, it's less about
Mhm.
the counterpart. What we don't understand and what's not integrated into judicial systems, say for instance, is that there is a round of self-awareness, self-discussion, your own connection to yourself that you can have that comes up when you're faced with that uncomfortability, that tension, that conflict with someone in your workplace or your family or a friend.
So to me, I think, and let me just make sure that we're aligned on this. Like when I talk to people and I say, when you're facing a high stakes situation, and so that can feel like I'm about to face something that's difficult for me. And so for me, helping people identify that trigger in them. So how does that equate to you when you think about that and you say you're looking for that opportunity, it happens here first?
Mhm.
Help people understand what that feels like in real life.
Yeah. By your example, a high stakes situation, I would want someone to pause and consider and reflect on why it's high stakes.
Mhm.
Maybe it's high stakes because it's just known within the space or the environment or the workplace that it's high stakes. This is your annual review, or something where it's just, socially and within the culture and environment where we work. This is like a big deal meeting. Other times it's high stakes because we make it high stakes. And I'd want to understand through the individual, what is it about it that's high stakes? Sometimes high stakes can mean fear, right? It can mean
Mhm.
some sense of insecurity or anxiety or unworthiness or something we're
Yeah.
attaching to it ourselves. So I would want to take a beat and a step and have just a chapter on, before we talk about the strategies for dealing with the other person, let's talk about what this is for you, where you're holding fear and bringing some level of awareness and consciousness to that.
Yeah. I was just in a session with a group and we were talking similar concepts. And so the person said, "What is high stakes for me?" And it's presenting in front of a room full of experts. And to your point, I asked like the why around that. And as she started talking about it, what happened was it's the questions they're gonna ask, the uncertainty of not knowing if I have the answers, if I'm gonna be able to answer their questions right. So that that kind of unlock gives you that opportunity not just to go, "Oh, this feels really uncomfortable. I don't know what I'm gonna do." But when
Mhm.
you can dive a little deeper and then you can prepare for that piece of it.
Really, so much of it is just that awareness. You
Mhm.
know, we tend to want to deal with our anxieties by preparing and maybe over preparing. And while there's nothing wrong with that and there's value in that, I feel there's even more power in finding that source of fear, that kernel of fear, and it may be some level of unworthiness. I can relate to that story. I've been this sort of younger attorney who's maybe speaking at a larger conference on a topic that's a little outside my wheelhouse, but I'm pushing myself to grow my practice and grow my expertise. And so I'm in this situation and I have sat there and what questions will they ask me? And what will
Yeah.
I say? And there's lots of strategies for that. You can start with, that's a great question. You know,
Yeah.
there's lots of things you can do, but there's a lot of power in just finding that fear and sitting with it. And there's strategies you can employ in terms of let's go into that fear. What's the worst that can happen? It's sit in that. And the miracle that happens is you start to release some of it. You start to come to a little bit like, oh, am I going to die? No, I'm not going to die if I don't answer that question perfectly. And we empower ourselves through that sort of release of the anxiety or fear.
Yeah, it's almost going to the what is the worst case scenario? If everything goes south, what are you going to do? And then you're prepared for anything.
Exactly. You're prepared for anything. And just like on an emotional level, you've kind of come into a little bit of a mindset of surrender on some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also so eye-opening to have somebody as accomplished as you to say, "I have these insecurities about do am I worthy enough? If am I gonna ask the right questions? How will I be perceived?" And so just unlocking that idea that we all face these situations that are high stakes for us, and it's not judgmental. It can be high stakes for a lot of different reasons, lack of experience, not knowing the people in the room, lack of sleep, like just not being able to just feel good at your best. And
Yeah.
it's okay.
It's completely okay. Honestly, I mean, I think the real roadblock and the real obstacle to imposter syndrome isn't imposter syndrome itself. We all have fears and insecurities and anxieties or feelings of unworthiness at some point or another as humans. It is part of the human experience. What holds us back is when we tell ourselves differently. What holds us
Mhm.
back is when we add a level of shame. Oh, why do I feel insecure? Now I'm ashamed and guilty about feeling imposter syndrome. Now I don't want people to know. Like that shame or guilt, that it's like another locked in layer, right? So the more we can just be like, of course I'm anxious. Why wouldn't I be? Like
Yeah.
that's normal, and start to really just sit in that.
You know what came to mind when you were saying that is social media, it shows like this perfect side of people that feels really different. We're very enticed by it because it doesn't feel like us. Yet the vulnerability, when people are really vulnerable, that's what people love because then they can see themselves in that. And so it's making that parallel into a corporate environment where your perception of yourself is not enough and the person across the table from you has their presentation already. They seem confident because that's what we teach. I'm just wondering, like, how do we make this mindset okay so that in the moment, it's okay to say, to be a little vulnerable? Like, we talk about that vulnerability, but what does it look like in the wild?
Yeah, I mean, vulnerability is power. So many leaders today are understanding this and sharing this. And I think the best, strongest leaders at the organizations and within the teams that really have the cutting edge are the ones who lead with that vulnerability. And the reason it's powerful is because it starts to teach through example to the other team members,
Mm,
lower level management, that
yeah.
you're safe, mistakes are okay. Suddenly you're creating something that feels safe and trusting. You have a freedom to make mistakes. You're unafraid to fail. You can innovate. So it really starts with leadership. I think it's really hard when you're in more of a middle management level to sort of be the person that can put yourself out there if your leadership isn't aligned to it. But vulnerability is power, and as soon as leaders and look, as companies are sort of growing and looking for their competitive advantage and looking for the way to be better than the rest, they're starting to realize and understand that there's a real opportunity for those organizations that have truly cohesive teams. And team cohesion comes from that trust, that safety, that freedom, really.
Yeah. I'd love for you to share a story from one of your clients because I think I love everything you said and I believe that people agree in theory. We talk about this and we know it from ourselves, but we're trying there's so much change and downsizing and people are trying to do so much with less that people go from meeting to meeting and get so sucked into kind of checking the box for the day. It's like, what does that look like? You have to be intentional about what does it look like to fail fast? What does it look like to show vulnerability as a leader? Because those moments are not something you can plan for. You really need to be ready to be in those moments so that you can showcase that vulnerability, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, it can be something simple and small. I was speaking the other day to a group and I felt myself feeling anxious. So I just said, I feel a little anxious right now. And I think it helped. I think it helps me. I think it helped everyone in the room. It can be small little things like that. I recently led a retreat with the upper management and middle management just last week. And I had been working with the executive team for a while and I knew those individuals. I didn't know their middle management quite as well. And what I realized quickly in the retreat is that there was more fear that had permeated a bit further than I had anticipated, really. I mean, the
Mm.
lower level management didn't feel comfortable sharing, didn't feel comfortable asking, didn't feel comfortable. And we had a breakout session and they were like, what is going on? Like what, so we had to pivot some things. And one of the exercises I led them through is I challenged the management team and we'd done it before, like just as a smaller group to share a source of anxiety, share a source of insecurity, share a source of fear. Think about where it's a pattern in your life. And, they really stepped up to the plate and the founding manager of the company really shared deeply and it shifted the whole dynamic. And by the end of the workshop, the lower level management was suddenly saying out loud, I'm a little fearful about, your strategic plan or what your strategic plan is for growth. And can you tell me more about that? And I think 3 days earlier, he would have kept that in, maybe made some assumptions, maybe jumped to his own ideas of what that might have meant for him, and it was very subtle. But I noted the shift. By the end of the workshop, it was, I'm concerned about this. Tell me more.
Yeah.
And we don't notice it, but it was a profound shift in sort of how they were interacting with each other.
And that courage that it took that leader to lead the way. When you think about leaders listening to this and saying, "How do I do that? Do I just go to my next meeting and go, hey, I'm going to just start out by I'm going to share this deep, dark secret or this vulnerability I have?" Is it as simple as just saying, maybe it is identifying when you feel it, express it?
Yeah, yeah. It can be, you want to cultivate a culture where people can own it, at least for themselves, at least have the conversation with themselves. I mean, so what I did is, I played a clip by Brene Brown, right? Talking about how
Mhm,
vulnerability is power. So I got some buy-in on the idea. Some people are like,
mhm.
oh yeah, I read her book or this or that. Got some buy-in to the idea and then just talked broadly about it and then set up the exercise. Or a leader in a company could do the same thing. You could read a quote from someone like Brene Brown or a similar author and just preface it with this idea and get some buy-in around the concept. And then say, in that vein, I'm going to share something in my day or that happened to me and lead into it that way.
Yeah. I love that. That's such great advice. And I want to kind of go back to that whole idea of conflict and how we need to reframe that as leaders. What advice can you give around embracing that and seeing it, maybe reframing it for yourself so that you can see it differently.
Sure, sure. The most important thing and the thing that we miss is taking that important first step to cultivate your own self awareness. Like, what are
Mm.
you holding? What are you afraid of? Where do you have some insecurity, pride, fear, apathy, scarcity, and just putting some light on that for yourself. And from there, you can sort of sit in that emotional charge for a beat
Mhm.
and at least have some awareness. Maybe you can release some of it. You can drop the story. If we can drop the drama, because the foundation is energy. Everything is energy. And
Yeah.
what we know today is that even our emotions have an energy and they're infectious, they spread. So when we can put some awareness around where we hold fear or some like fear based emotion, we can lift that or change that or evolve that or like shift it a little bit. And we can answer the question for ourselves: what do I need? What do I need? Like, what do you need in terms of the problem and the solution? Something practical, pragmatic, that's oriented around your business objectives. When you're answering the question, what do I need? And the answers are to make them wrong, to be right,
Mhm.
to show them, to prove them, to not let them win. Ask yourself, like, that's fine, but ask yourself, is that how your profits are driven? Like,
Yeah.
is that how you serve your clients? Is that your business goal? Is that your business model? When we're in that righteousness, that victimhood, that emotionally charged kind of space, we don't have clarity about what's the actual problem or clarity on the paths to resolution. We're sort of stuck. I mean, and it's got to be a choice. It's got to be a choice you make. And if you don't align to that choice, then I can refer you out to lots of litigation counsel who will happily bill by the hour. But there are higher and more sustaining ways to think about tension and conflict.
Yeah. I I can't help but think that people, since we avoid conflict or we anticipate because we know that whatever we have to say or whatever we need to resolve is going to have an impact on the other person, that we avoid it, that actually makes it worse.
It
And
does.
then that gets our mind even more shut down to say, I'm going to be right. I'm going to show them, to those things that you said, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the fear of conflict. And I've struggled with this. I think it's part of why I'm driven to do what I do is because I don't like conflict. I really don't. But I also have had to sit with the fact that I'm holding fear around conflict.
Yeah.
And again, it's what's the worst that can happen? We have to do the work with ourselves to have our own sort of grounded inner compass, our own strong, solid sense of self so that we can allow other people to be in their uncomfortability, allow other people to feel and experience what they need to go through. I call it the feelings tunnel. The other person might need to go through his feelings tunnel. And don't be afraid of the immediate reactions because it might be the best gift given him. And that doesn't mean we don't have boundaries, right? Boundaries are different. You can have boundaries. You can have, boundaries in terms of the length of the conversation, the nature of the conversation, or your own energy boundaries. Boundaries are important, but, we can't be afraid of conflict. We can't hold fear in that little side space over there because it's the same as the fear that might have you in fisticuffs with another person.
Yeah. So I hear you saying, like, having self-awareness around what you fear in general, and also when you're facing something, being able to say to yourself, I'm going to face this, is going to be a challenge. This is high stakes for me because I know it's going to evoke conflict. Being really careful to identify if your mindset's right before you go in. Are you
Exactly.
looking for a win-win, if you will? If you're looking for an outcome that serves the business and not this, because that's the other thing that happens to me in conflict is you get tied up in that I'm the right I'm right. I remember I was with a consulting firm and the head of the company, the partner in the company went into this conversation. It was just like a meet and greet, this guy that's a technical guy in a big company. And they started talking about technology and they started like kind of one-upping one another, and it became kind of this tension about who knew better and who was right. And when we left, I really gave a lot of credit to the partner. He goes, "Wow, I just got swept up in that. That was not like his ego, right, got in the
Yeah.
way of wanting to win the argument,
Yeah.
wanting to be, instead of remembering, I'm building this relationship and the outcome of this meeting is this,
Right.
not this conversation.
Yeah, I love that story, and I love 2 parts of that story. The part I love the most is that he reflected afterwards, and he said, "I really got swept up." That's it, folks. That's
Mhm.
awareness, you know?
Yeah.
It's not about never being in conflict. Conflict isn't wrong or bad if it's the pathway to help you see yourself. So that
Mm.
leader who's able to say, "Wow, I really got swept up in ego stuff," he can then have a conversation with himself about what that was for him, what that
Mhm.
was really driven by. It's probably some like underlying feeling of unworthiness. Need to be right and like kind of like, go toe for toe with someone because we really want to get to a space of what I call grounded clarity, where we can answer the question, what do I need? And we have a solid sense for how to use the words and the emotion and the energy that will guide us to that. It's not about being right or making someone else wrong. And if we're in that headspace, then we probably have a little more of our own conversation with ourselves to unpack.
Yeah. And for him, like, I'm glad you saw that because I was, like, impressed that he was able to say that to me right away, and I'm a junior person to him in his consultancy, so that was really good of him to be able to say it, but it builds that muscle a little
Yeah,
bit because him admitting that to himself, well, he'll identify that next time he starts going down that road, and he'll see that in himself, and he'll click in quicker.
exactly. To me, that's a strong leader. I mean, we're not
Mhm.
looking for people to be perfect. We're
Yeah.
looking for perfectly imperfect. We're
Yeah.
looking for those people who can constantly be self aware and conscious of themselves because that spreads and that example is set within an organization and it permeates throughout. And if everybody's doing that, then you're doing pretty well.
Yeah. I love that. So when you give advice to people, I know you've already given some tips that people can do, but can you synthesize a couple for us so that
Sure,
the
sure.
listeners can really think about what they can put into
Yeah.
practice?
Yeah, I think the critical thing when you think you're in a conflict or approaching a conflict or a tension point is to ask yourself, what do I need? Can you
Mm,
answer that question from a space of grounded clarity, identifying a practical solution? Or when you have that conversation with yourself, are you caught up in being right? So you
mm,
want to get yourself to what do I need? And the pathways to doing that are really just stillness and mindfulness, any modality kind of based on stillness or mindfulness or that break from the counterpart. So I would say answering the question, what do I need? Having some sense of self-awareness. And then once you kind of do have that grounded clarity, creating a space for the other person to work through whatever they're needing to work through, with boundaries, with compassionate boundaries. I think there's this false idea that we get what we want by convincing, controlling, persuading the other person.
yeah.
But we actually can get there faster and more effectively if we just can hold some space for the other person to go through whatever it is they're needing to sort out. We
Yeah.
can't do it, and we can't do it until we have some awareness of ourselves.
Yeah. Do you think asking the other person what do they need can be powerful for them?
Yeah, yeah. Asking them what they need. Any kind of questions that are begin with how or what. What do you feel? What do you need? How did we get here? What do we do next? And the reason is because we're putting the focus on the other person.
Mhm.
When you put the focus on the other person, they start to feel heard. It's not about whether you
Yeah.
actually hear them, it's whether they feel heard.
Yeah.
Because once they feel heard, their defenses aren't up. They're starting to trust. Now you're actually starting to have a dialogue that's open and effective. So, an important strategy in negotiation or conflict resolution is allowing that other person to feel heard. And how and what questions are my favorite tool for that.
Yeah. There is so much power in that, and it gets you out of your head by asking questions and then letting them have that silence and that space to do what they need to do. I just wanted to reiterate what you said because I, as an executive coach, and I've gone through coaching school and I've done all this, I can't even begin to tell you how amazed I am every time I ask this simple question that doesn't seem like it was that big of a question to me, and I allow the other person to process and them go, wow, you are amazing. You helped me see this differently. And it had nothing to do with me. It was all them.
Exactly. Isn't it amazing?
Mhm.
When we put the power on the other person to share and speak and feel heard and feel seen, we actually create the power of connection, power of sameness. We start to create a space where both minds can grow. And it's less about this resistance, this sort of control or this forcing of an agenda, and more about a collaboration.
Yeah. Oh, this has been so interesting to me. And we're so aligned. There, we both have the same mission to help people get through these high stakes situations. I'd love for everybody to know where they can follow you and get to know you. And also, if you could give us one piece of advice that you want us to take away today.
Yeah, I mean, conflict is empowering. Conflict is opportunity, but it's about stopping and pausing and reflecting with yourself. And it's empowering to know that we actually have the power to effectively navigate conflict, regardless of what the other person does or doesn't do. But to answer the first part of your question, yes, I have a website. You can find me via my website. It's www.conflictreimagined.com.
Love
I'm
it.
also on LinkedIn. You can find me there. But yeah,
We'll put all that information in the show notes too, that so they can find you. I know we're going to stay connected because I feel like there's so much synergy between what we do, and you've really enlightened me to even claim a conflict and not be reactionary to it, but embrace it and look at it as an opportunity to even understand more deeply the position of the other person.
exactly, exactly. Yes, agree on all of that.
If you know somebody that needs to listen to this conversation, please forward it on to them. Let them get to know Ursula as well. Conflict is something we all have to face and really embrace that. And it all goes around to adopting that negotiator mindset. And remember, that is more than a skill, it truly is a mindset. So until next time.